Hello, everyone, and welcome to Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. I'm your host, retired NYPD Sergeant Bill Cannon, a 27-year veteran of the NYPD. Guys, we have such an amazing show tonight. I can't wait to get it going. Someone that's in the business, so to speak, in the homicide business, if you can call that a business. And here's the thumbnail up on the screen. And he has a new book out called The Book of Murder. And he's a former Los Angeles Assistant District Attorney Matt Murphy, and if we have time, he's going to weigh in on the Bryan Kohberger and the Rex Heuermann case. But I don't want to take any time away from his promoting his book. He's a fantastic prosecutor. Never ever lost a murder case, which is just absolutely incredible. I guess he's never faced New Yorkers, or maybe he has. I think he probably has. Anyway, folks, so hold on to your hats, hold on to your glass of wine, hold on to your service dog, whatever you got to hold on to, because you're about to enter true crime from a police perspective. You're about to enter the off-the-cuff zone, the police off-the-cuff zone.
There has to be some common sense.
They were the ones who called 911 to get him help, and now they're calling for change.
Folks, before we get going, a word from our sponsor. BetOnline is the world's most trusted betting platform and your number one source for everything sports betting. Every stat, matchup breakdown, and even live odds and spreads to bet on during games. With the largest catalog of odds on everything from football, Major League Baseball playoffs, NHL, NBA, to political props. When the game's over, head on over to our online casino and get in on a game of blackjack or poker, or unwind with one of our over 150 slots games. Head to the website today to get in on the action with America's most trusted site for online wagering. Bet Online, the game starts here. Joining me tonight to interview this amazing guest is retired NYPD Sergeant, professor at Albertus Magnus College in Connecticut. Also, along the way, he just slapped a law degree on his credentials. Welcome to the show, Professor Michael Geary. Mike, welcome.
Hey, William. Good evening. Thank you for having me on. This is great.
It's going to be excellent. And also, we have Matt Murphy, and I don't know, he's probably heard it a million times. This is Murphy's Law. Here we go. Matt, welcome to the show.
Happy to be with you guys.
Matt, I just, your publicist sent me like the book in, the computer screen form. And today I just got in the mail the hard copy. So,
love it.
So I was banging out. I read almost the whole thing today. I didn't get through the whole thing, but it's a fantastic book. Let me put it up on the screen so the folks know. You can get this at Amazon. The Book of Murder, a prosecutor's journey through love and death. Prosecutor Matt Murphy, which I previously mentioned, is undefeated in murder cases, and not easy cases either. Some really high-profile cases, very difficult cases. And Matt, reading some of the, you had that quote from, I think it's Nietzsche, and I've heard that quote before, because I was in homicide my last 10 years on the NYPD, but it's so true. Why don't you quote the quote, because I'm sure you have it right at the tip of your tongue.
Oh, yeah. Well, sure. It's those who endeavor to fight monsters must be careful lest they become a monster. That's one of the all-time greats. And Nietzsche was a genius. And that applies to so much of what we have done for our professional careers. It certainly applies to cops. It's like we got to process them as prosecutors. So at least we didn't have to get bloody in the process like you guys did. But that's the thing. It's spot on, right? When you go out and you're fighting bad guys, you got to make sure that you remain a good one.
Matt, that's so true. And one of the things that you said, and I've said this a million times myself, is that you can't unsee things that you've seen, and the horror that we've all seen. I don't know if you've heard of this woman who has a book out now called I don't have it in front of me. Barbara Butcher. She was a medical legal investigator. She attended like 685 death scenes.
What the dead tell us?
What the dead know. Yeah,
Yeah,
that's the name of her book. And she mentions the same things, like, you can't unsee things. And, I think that we all, even though we don't like to admit it, we all have a level of PTSD. And it may take the form of just waking up and an image came into your head that you didn't necessarily invite into your brain, but it's there because of what you just said. You can't unsee things.
Yeah, I think for me, it got kind of clinical in a way, and I'm sure it was for you too. As NYPD guys, you've seen it all. I mean, truly, you've seen it all. And for me, like going to the scene itself, you kind of get I got used to it in a sense because I'm watching things for forensic reasons. Like I'm looking for things that I want to argue in court. But the thing that wakes me up most it was the responsibility that went along with it. You know what I mean? Because we did a vertical system in Orange County where I worked for 26 years as a DA, where we teamed up with our detectives. So, like a lot of jurisdictions, you get the police that investigate, they throw a stack of reports on one DA's desk, they read it, they decide the charges, they file, somebody else does the arraignment, somebody else does the preliminary hearing, and then it winds up way down the line on the trial attorney's desk. We did it differently. We got assigned a patch of the county in homicide. So I had Newport Beach, Costa Mesa, Laguna, and Irvine, and I would go to all those scenes myself. And I worked with the same detectives who were awesome over and over and over again. And the idea is I'm there that night at 3 a.m, signing search warrants and making sure they're done right. And then that detective is with me next to me at counsel table 3, 5, sometimes 8 years later when the jury comes back with a verdict and all the way through sentencing. And it's a better mousetrap. It works better. But the thing that always got me, it wasn't so much the gore, and we've seen plenty of that. It was the responsibility that went along with it. Because I'd always sit down with the victims' families and give them my personal cell number, just let them know that somebody cared, somebody, and I wanted them to meet my team. And, those are my nightmares. I wake up, that nightmare we all have about how we haven't studied for the test or we forgot to drop the class. It got replaced for me about halfway through my time in homicide, where I'm standing up and I'm arguing and a jury, they're not listening to me. You know what I mean? Like that's my nightmare now. Like I got all this responsibility on my shoulders, and I might not bring it home because they're not listening. And that's what keeps me up at night. I still have that one a couple times a week.
Matt, I always used to think of sometimes I wouldn't be able to sleep when think of the things I didn't do that I should have done. And then you'd wake up and go, oh shit, I didn't do this.
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about. See, a crime lab personnel or a coroner, they can go to all those scenes. I mean, 600 is a lot. I only went to about 100. But, it's that responsibility that goes with the police officer. Like, did I forget to put this in the report? Is some defense lawyer going to accuse me of hiding evidence? Like, that's the shit. Can I swear on your show?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay. Yeah, that's the shit that really stresses you out. And that's what wakes you up in the middle of the night, especially in cases of kids or really innocent people or the truly horrific ones. You have the responsibility, to make sure it's done right so you don't blow it, and that's something that most people don't understand. I tried to explain that a little bit in the book. And those detectives, I have such it's not even a respect. I have a love for so many cops for what they did and what they did for me and these families. You see a different side of policing when you're working as a prosecutor for as long as I did it in a vertical capacity. And truly, not blowing smoke here. Police officers are some of the best humans I've met in the course of my life. And I've dedicated a lot of my private practice. I didn't really put this in the book, I don't think, but about half my practice is defending police officers, which is a booming business in Southern California, especially in Los Angeles County where I live. With our DA, George Gascon, he's one of these Soros-backed, hard left, cop-hating ideologues. And it's like the injustices that man is perpetrating on the women and men in law enforcement in Southern California is shameful, and I'm doing everything I can to fight for him. So
good for you. That's Matt, what you say is so true. I always said, even though I was among, at one time there was almost 40,000 cops on the NYPD. I used to tell people, cops are some of the best people I've ever met in my life as a profession. There's certain professions where you could say, that guy's a piece of shit. Yeah, but he's this, he's that, he's a lawyer. No, just kidding.
There's plenty of that, believe me.
Oh, yeah.
He's a stockbroker. He's this, he's that, but certain professions are known to have their share of hooligans. But I think as a profession, policing, your heart has to pretty much be in the right place. And most people take the job for the right reasons. Mike, your thoughts? I don't want to be talking over you.
No, you're right. When you come on, you're very idealistic. That's what it's all about. It's all about seeking truth and justice and getting the bad guys and cops and robbers and all the stuff that you wanted to do since you were like a 12-year-old. And then you realize that's not really the job, and that maybe not everybody really sees the world the same way you do. And we do have our share of quite interesting characters on the NYPD. I knew so many people who got in trouble with the law themselves on the state level, on the federal level. So many people that quit the job early on, burnt out, did some bad stuff. But, they are an interesting bunch, and they become, in some ways, unfortunately, like the people that they're chasing. They live the life, odd hours, partying, don't give a damn about anything. Figure that, they know what they're doing every single moment. They can't admit they're wrong. Can't admit they have a weakness, and a lot of it is vanity. So in some ways, they're like almost like some of the people that end up chasing down, smart and stupid at the same time. And the problem is when a cop does something wrong, it makes the news. They're not just the average robber. They're not just the average burglar. There's something more because of the public trust that's been violated. That's the most toughest thing for when you see cops, that when you retire and you make it through 20, 25 years and you look back and you sit there and go, okay, so who are the funny guys? Who are the really good guys to work with? The guys who they would be excellent cops. They knew everything. And then there was the guys who were just like, from outer space. And I just want to say, Matt, in your book, I liked the way that you gave credit to the cops and and as an attorney, I appreciated how you gave some praise to all of the people who you worked with in the homicide unit in Orange County. I thought that was really good. So thank you very much for that.
Yeah, thanks. And of course, everything you just said, I agree with 100%. And, there's an adage that when I was in sexual assault, we had a Huntington Beach officer who was bad news, right? And Huntington was one of my cities when I was in sex cases. Same thing, vertical capacity. So I'm working with the same detectives over and over again. And I'm assigned to this place called West Court at the time. And I was about to file charges on this guy. And I'm thinking, man, because I'd heard of the thin blue line and all that stuff, and the blue silence or whatever that is. And I'm like, this is this going to alienate me? And he was a reasonably popular guy until they found out what he did. And my boss at the time, who's very experienced, he's now a Superior Court judge named Rick King. And I'm like, hey, man, I'm worried about alienating these detectives I'm working with. And he laughed at me, literally laughed at me. He's like, nobody hates a bad cop more than a good one. Nobody hates a bad cop more than a good one. And he was right. As soon as I filed, I got more phone calls from guys like, stick it to that mother effer. And, and that's the thing, because it makes everybody else look bad. And for the people that are there for the right reasons, which is the vast majority of them, and I had one of my old investigators, Larry Montgomery, who's in the book, he said that police, this is a cop saying this, he said, all police lay somewhere on a spectrum of the thumpers on one end and the thinkers on the other, and I always thought that was pretty good too. Like the detectives, especially the homicide detectives, tend to be thinkers. They really make their living with their minds. And then you got, every police department needs the guys that kick in doors too, and wrestle with the drunks. So, but my experience with law enforcement has been very, very positive. And that's why I defend cops every chance I get, professionally and in the media.
Matt, it's so true to talk about, like, when I first went into the detective bureau, my background was anti-crime. I did 6.5 years in plain clothes, and I just wanted to go out and lock people up every single night, watch the robbery go down and move in because we're in plain clothes. Now, anti-crime has gone the way of the horse and buggy in New York City, which is the same thing that's happening in LA. the anti-crime, the anti-cop sentiment has gotten rid of a lot of these supremely effective units because, they're violating people's rights, but they're also protecting the lives of people who deserve to have their lives protected and aren't having them protected now because the left has given way to more support for the thugs than for the police.
Yeah, thug a hug. I heard that or hug a thug. I heard that the other day. Hug a thug. Yeah, and look in LA, like I think that I want to give. It's like I want to understand the mentality, and I think that really trying my hardest. I want to say it comes from a good place, right? And believe it or not, guys, New York, despite the way it votes, you guys are a conservative bastion of like pro-cop sentiment compared to what exists in Los Angeles County. Like you got a newspaper that hates the police, unfortunately, and they this guy Gascon, he rolled in and he was the former DA of San Francisco, and violent crime has skyrocketed, and literally the only people he's interested in prosecuting, in my view, are police officers. And it's fortunately he's got a serious challenger. We got an election coming up in November, and I think he's down 30 points in the last poll. So
excellent.
Even Los Angeles, I think, woke up to the idea that permissive law enforcement and soft on crime in a city that large is essentially suicidal. And it doesn't work. And I think people are sick of getting their cars broken into and their houses broken into and having their local jewelry store smash and grab and all that stuff. And it's just, that sort of mentality, I haven't really been able to figure out. And I want to see the good in at least the motive, but a lot of the people they're kind of tourists, they come in, they go from issue to issue, and then it's like, oh, cops are bad. I watched the George Floyd tape, and so I'm going to vote for. And they let this guy run. It was this right after the summer of 2020, so right after the whole George Floyd thing. Not former DA of San Francisco. This guy's never tried a case, by the way. Not former DA of San Francisco, where he would have lost the election because we know what happened there. They let him run as a quote criminal justice reformer, and so everybody in LA voted for the guy. I mean, everybody that's ignorant. And it's been friggin' blood in the streets in that city for the last 4 years, and I think we've seen the same in Philadelphia. And I'm no fan of Alvin Bragg here in New York either, to be honest.
He's bad.
And, he's bad news. And it's like we see that over. It's Soros money, and people should educate themselves on that. But that's not a conspiracy theory. George Soros, the Soros Foundation, backs these candidates, and they have to promise to prosecute police officers. And I got a case right now of a guy who's cleared of an OIS, an officer-involved shooting in 2018, where he dumped a gangster who it turned out later it was a pellet gun in his lap, but it was indistinguishable from a 12-gauge sawed-off shotgun. And he's all high on meth. He's a documented gangster. He's a suspect in a murder at the time of his shooting. And he's got his hands up, and he reaches on body cam. I think maybe he was going to take off his seatbelt. I don't really know, but he reaches in the direction of what looks like a sawed-off shotgun. It's in the parking lot of a supermarket at 8 o'clock at night, and there's kids everywhere in the parking lot, and my guy dumps him. And so he gets cleared in 2018. Gascon comes in. BLM, quells the BLM supporters. They vote for him. They donate to him, and they indicted my guy for a manslaughter. And if he goes to prison, he's got no chance. And it's not right. It's morally wrong. It's unjust, and that's kind of the world we live in now. But I'm still in the fight. Hoping to do some good.
Matt, this case here reminded me of so many. And you could talk about this guy was like basically a career sex offender, murderer, serial killer, and he was on the dating game. That's so California.
It's so California.
Put a serial killer on the dating game.
Yeah,
I remember that game show.
Yeah, those images he just showed. Those were in 1977. His name is Rodney Alcala. That's his booking photo from My Guys at Huntington Beach. The detective who put handcuffs on that guy he was a 27-year-old first homicide detective. Like he just rotated into detectives. His name is Craig Robeson, and now he's a Superior Court judge. And he's one of my best friends. He texts me about it half dozen times a day. So he went on that. That's our composite there, lower right. he went on the show in the middle of he probably killed 100 people over the course of his spree, but going back to what we were just talking about, that guy he had a life sentence in 1971 after kidnapping, raping, and almost murdering an 8-year-old little girl named Tally Shapiro. And the California Board of Prison Terms released him after 34 months. And he killed dozens and dozens and dozens of people, including at least 5 here in New York, where he was, after we were done with them, our case got enough publicity that they finally filed charges on 2 or 3 of the cases out here. And he came out, pled guilty, and I think he figured San Quentin was more comfortable. So he pled guilty to the ones he was charged with. And we uncovered another one in Wyoming, and he's cleared one in Marin, a couple in San Diego, one in Texas. So this guy was really prolific and very sadistic.
Matt, that reminds me like when the criminal justice system doesn't protect the public because of ideology. It's not okay. That's not, and people have to understand that. That's why they have to vote and not vote for these leftist progressives that are just nuts. They're out of their mind. There was a case in New York. It's got to be 10, 15 years ago. There was a John Jay College student. Her name was Emet Sengian. She was a graduate student. She went to a bar named The Falls late at night with her friend. She was very drunk. Her friend left her there. The bouncer, who happened to be a serial rapist, that was before now, of course, they're supposed to be state licensed to be bouncers or anything in security. But yet, Hollywood does their films on the streets in New York. They hire homeless people to do no parking details, which is 100% against the law. But they don't make enough money, Hollywood. So let's hire homeless people to do the no. Anyway, don't get me started. Anyway, so this guy, his name was Darrell Littlejohn. He kidnaps her from the bar, takes her home, rapes her, and murders her in his house. And that was one of the first cases. I think it was 99, 2000. It was one of the first cases or second cases where DNA technology came in, and that's what nailed him. But he was actually a serial rapist. And those are the things that the criminal justice system is supposed to prevent, and government is supposed to prevent through protecting people through laws like having bouncers need to be, licensed. It doesn't mean because you can bench 400 pounds at Gold's Gym doesn't mean you should be a bouncer, Yeah,
well, the ACLU opposed the CODA system. They filed a bunch of oppositions to the requirement that convicted violent felons have to give their DNA. And of course, that's one of those things that there have been, imagine the lives that have been saved because those guys were caught and connected to other rapes and other murders that they'd gotten away with, and I can't tell you how many of those I prosecuted where we got a cold DNA hit from some dude in another state. Like when Michigan went online, it was one of the last states to go online, our caseloads, we all got a couple of them, guys that had raped and murdered people in Orange County. And I don't know why they all went to Michigan, but we got a bunch of them. And it's one of those things. I think that might be part of the problem. As a country, we've just become so irrationally divided. There's like the normal people in the middle and those that are supportive of law enforcement and the ones that lean right. And then, I think there's plenty of rational Democrats out there that that care about their families and care about public safety, and then you've got this really vocal, super dumb, gullible minority on the extreme of the left that they hate cops and they want to help these guys and they think that everybody that's in prison is somehow a victim of some sort of institutional wrongdoing, and then these guys get out and they don't get paroled to my neighborhood of Manhattan Beach, California, or like my place here is on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. They don't come here. They go back to the same neighborhoods that those same people profess to care so much about. And it's just
Matt,
hypocrisy.
Matt, do you mean now you're bi-coastal?
Yeah, I am bi-coastal. Okay. Yep. I'm trying to get used to that term. But yeah, spending about 60% of my time here in the city.
I'm jumping the red eye to LA tonight.
Hopefully I don't sound like that when I say it. But.
No, I'm not imitating your accent.
No, I know.
What people think, and this is what you look like in a suit. So this is your game uniform. when
Yep.
when you well, actually, you haven't been a prosecutor for a while now. You work in defense, and you're also a talking head for ABC, right?
Yeah, that was my ABC headshot right there. I'm probably due to update it. That's from a couple of years ago. Yeah, that was the day that I went through, and that kind of a funny story that day. I'm signing all my cards. That was my first day at ABC after I signed my contract after I left the DA's office, and I had like a minder assigned to me, and she's like, "Okay, we got to talk to Debbie in HR, and we got to talk to this person and that person, and hoping you can speak to Diane, and then we got to talk to Phil and get your photo taken." Turns out Diane was Diane Sawyer, and they walked me into this office, and she's got a forest of Emmys up there. Couldn't have been nicer. And this was right before COVID hit, and she had some, I thought, brilliant ideas on some projects that kind of got shelved for a little while that COVID sort of took out of the mix. But I should go knock on her door over at ABC. I got to go in there tomorrow. Yeah, they've actually been really nice to me. I do mostly stuff with 2020. We're shooting a thing on tomorrow on one of these cases, and it's fun because it kind of keeps me in the game in a way. I'm up on Kohberger and Gilgo Beach, which is fascinating.
We're gonna get to Kohberger later. I want to pick your brain on that a little bit, but I just want to tell you a funny story. I was doing a lot of talking head stuff for News Nation and some other stuff, and I was on with Dan Abrams one night, just about 2 years ago, because I've been put in the penalty box for like 2 years for this. They were asking, Biden made a comment about cops should never shoot center mass. They should shoot for the arm or the leg. So they had me on as like an expert. And I said, that is the most ridiculous statement I have ever heard in my life. First of all, most cops can't hit an arm or a leg. They'll miss. And if they do hit it, the danger is the bullet will go right through and kill an innocent bystander. That's why cops are trained to shoot center mass. So that is someone that knows nothing about fire. So after I said that, the producer was like, that wasn't really, she starts, I said, listen, lady, that's the way it is. You know what? So I was put in the penalty box for 2 years. A couple of weeks ago, they called me again. Hey, you want to call? Oh, I'm out of the penalty box.
Well, I mean, you guys have seen a femoral artery when it's shot with a bullet. It's like, it's as bad as getting shot in the heart. I think that line came out of like Lethal Weapon. Like Danny Glover said, I shoot for the legs. And it's just, it's moronic. Yeah. I didn't know that Biden said that. That's
yes,
just,
he did.
I guess it doesn't surprise me. I mean, yeah, it's just complete ignorance in every way. It's like, that's not how it works. And then, yeah, it's going to go right through the arm. It's going to hit the old lady holding groceries. And then, then you get some DA like Gascon who's going to turn around and prosecute him for gross negligence.
Yeah, recklessness.
Yeah, right. It's, I didn't know. They've been really nice to me at News Nation. I do some stuff for the different shows there. And Elizabeth Vargas especially.
I've seen you on her show. And then, Bobby Chacon, who's an FBI agent, he does a lot of talking head stuff. He says, if they think you're a barking dog, they won't put. I said, they must think I'm a barking dog.
Well, it's the voice of experience and actual real expertise on that. Yeah. Like, I mean, I know, man, I have to wrestle myself away from the rant that I want to go on half the time when I do some of these shows, one way or another. And I had one where, and that really goes both sides. I'm sure it's the same with you guys. You call it as you see it, right? I had one where some prosecutor filed murder charges on a guy that was clearly innocent, and he was acquitted ultimately. But it was like, as a prosecutor, I'm looking at going, who in their right mind would do this? And I blasted them both barrels. I'm not gonna hold fire just because they, sit on the same side of the table that I used to, but I'll call it as I see it on the other side too, and I don't know.
Well, Matt, even since you left the district attorney's office, technology has just raced ahead, like at the speed of sound, especially what we've seen on the Gilgo case, the Kohberger case. This investigative genetic genealogy that's a gift from God. I'm telling you, that is unbelievable,
Yeah.
And that law enforcement and the good guys have to stay ahead of the other side, because look, you mentioned before, the left is trying to get rid of a lot of technological advances. For example, they've protested facial recognition. It's unfair. There's Chicago doesn't want ShotSpotter.
Yeah, they're getting rid of it.
That's also prejudicial. Oh, why? Because it's catching the shooters. It's just outrageous, the mentality of these people. Yes, let's get rid of all the technological advances that give the advantage to law enforcement.
Right. Not only the new tech, but California, there was a big movement. I haven't followed it because it was driving me crazy. I decided for my mental health, I needed to stop reading about it. They're trying to get rid of police dogs. They're trying to get rid of canines, and I mean, just, and again, it's, in my view, the way I like to think of it, it's not even the left, it's the extreme left. It's the true cop-hating lunatics that don't understand that these are servants of the community and they're human beings, and some are good and some are bad, but the vast majority are good and they're there to protect us. And I mean, in California, guys, it's maddening to me, and it's discouraging. My sister, we both grew up in LA, and she moved to Texas a couple years ago. There was a flasher down the street. So there's an elementary school. She had a 14-year-old daughter. There's an elementary school down the street. And this guy gets hooked for exposing himself to children. No cash bail, one of those things like Embrace programs by George Gascon again. That's a nonviolent case, right? Nonviolent misdemeanor. He gets out. He gets arrested again in the same spot the same day before the school day was even out, doing the same stuff. And that, for her, she was just, what do the dealers do in Vegas when they're out? She's out. She's like, that's it. Moving to Texas. And she was an escrow in a house like 2 weeks later. Packed up, moved her law practice, the whole deal. And a lot of people are doing that in California. It's like that, I heard a great term, toxic empathy. It's like their sense of empathy, even though they don't actually understand the profession. Like, why don't you just shoot them in the leg? They have no idea what they're talking about. Right. And they roll in and they sponsor legislation, and the way they read it up. And California has the voter initiative system, which is a disaster every voting cycle, because they'll title something like, they'll have 10 provisions that go soft on crime, and they'll add like a year to some midterm provision, and and they'll call it the Crime Victims Prevention Act, that, and then they'll say increases penalties for certain offenses, and everybody votes for it. It's pretty bad. I mean, it's another reason why, believe it or not, even here in New York, is with de Blasio and all the stuff you guys have gone through, it's kind of a nice change for me, because it's more rational.
This guy Bragg, the district attorney, he came in with a 9-page manifesto that basically had him almost rewriting the law of New York State. Like, if he felt that a robbery first degree with a gun, if the guy didn't shoot anybody, he would downgrade it to a misdemeanor. That is like not okay.
No, and what's happening is police officers are getting shot in New York City as a result of it, and sometimes they're getting killed. And that's happened. I had you go to the CVS right down the street. I was in there today, and you see all those, the plexiglass.
Oh yeah, they got to lock up the toothpaste.
It's insane. And the thing is, that's not somebody who wants to go brush their teeth for your viewers. They're selling that stuff. That's all black market. It's rings. They're doing that for profit. And as a result, the margins are already really thin on those businesses, and people are losing their neighborhood drugstores as a result, and so we all suffer for that. That's exactly what, the Alvin Bragg thing, that's toxic empathy. It's like, he has a sense of empathy, and then it's toxic for everybody else. The criminal justice system is designed to have two zealous advocates, one for the prosecution, one for the defense, each lawyer zealously advocating for their position, a judge in the middle, and a jury following the law. And that's how it works. And what they figured out is if you pour enough money into one of their guys, and an ideologue who doesn't want to punish crime, then the system breaks down. That's exactly what's happened in Los Angeles. And you definitely see, it's not as bad here as in LA, but I had some homeless guy went into the same CVS last summer, and this guy was just grabbed a bag, was loading it up. He had like 5 hats on his head, just about knocked me over going in. And the poor CVS employees who were down there, they're not allowed to stop him. And they were kind of gathering around the door, and he stopped and he's like, F you all, F you up, That's a robbery, as you guys know. Yeah. He accomplished that taking via force or fear. That's a robbery in every state in America. But it's exactly what you're talking about. The Alvin Bragg doesn't want to prosecute that guy. And the problem is that what NYPD guy wants to tackle him get scabies in the process for a case that isn't going to be prosecuted. Blow out a knee, have the guy beef you, say that you use excessive force, it creates massive disincentive for the actual women and men in law enforcement on the street to actually make that arrest and put the guy in jail because he's getting right back out again. And then, the ACLU sued Los Angeles and Orange counties in Southern California. I think it's a federal mandate now that for the shopping cart guys or the tent guys, with the shopping cart of shit that they're pushing down the street. If you arrest that guy for whatever he's doing, if that guy had a shopping cart outside in Southern California, that police officer has an obligation to inventory every single freaking newspaper in that shopping cart with all the feces and all the rest of that stuff. And those guys are getting released before the cops can even finish the inventory. And then it's guaranteed he's going to get his stuff back and go, yeah, you stole, my red pair of scissors, you stole. And then we got an IA. And I mean, I'm doing those. I'm an attorney for the Fraternal Order of Police. And I mean, if I was smart enough business-wise, I'd hire a couple of young lawyers and just do those because there's so many of them, and it's totally unfair and sorry to rant here, guys, but I believe the job of a defense lawyer is a sacrosanct thing in America. It really is, because what could be worse than being accused falsely of something you didn't do? And then those same people turn around and have no problem with false accusations against police officers. It's like the hypocrisy there is beyond rich. And I see, I've represented cops who screwed up really bad, and I've had some that were fired, that probably correctly, I understood why the police department had to do it, but I've had a lot more that literally did nothing wrong. And somebody's mom beefs them, or the homeless guy beefs them, and they wind up going through a whole, IA and internal affairs investigation. That takes 6 months, and they can't promote, and it sucks for them. And God forbid they actually have to, respond to a threat of deadly force, because then it's endless for those guys, So anyway.
Absolutely. Folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, real crime stories. If you like real crime, true crime from a police perspective, you're in the right place. And if you're not subscribed, hit that red subscribe button right on the screen. Give us a thumbs up, hit the like button. If you want to contribute to the show financially, we have a Patreon with 4 different levels. And we also have a YouTube channel membership with 5 different levels. We appreciate all of our fans, our friends, our subscribers. And that's how we're able to get outstanding guests like Matt Murphy to come on the show, Murphy's Law. And he's here tonight. And I want to, Matt, if you don't mind, I want to play this because a while ago, and of course, we've been covering the Kohberger case and the Rex Heuermann and the Gilgo Beach case since the beginning, but I've used this on a lot of my shows, and it was you on News Nation talking about how there is a ton of evidence against Bryan Kohberger. And there are so many people saying, he didn't do it. I think he's being framed. I'm like, so, okay, let me just play this here.
Matt Murphy. Matt, we know that some of the victims' families do want the death penalty. These crimes were heinous. But, and they don't blame that. I don't blame them. But how does a prosecutor make this decision?
So a prosecutor under these circumstances will weigh the aggravating versus mitigating circumstances. It's essentially the same job that a jury will be asked to do. And this case is so overwhelmingly awful, for lack of a better term. I think there's going to be a lot of pressure within the DA's office to actually seek the death penalty on that.
And the evidence seems to be very strong. I mean, it's not circumstantial. There's DNA evidence, there's cell phone evidence, there's a lot of evidence here.
The evidence against Bryan Kohberger is overwhelming. And
unbelievable. You know how many people still in the chat are saying, oh, I disagree. I think he's innocent.
Oh, yeah, I'm looking.
But Matt, just if you may, and you don't have to go over the whole case, tell us why you think the evidence is overwhelming.
Well, for one thing, his DNA is there, guys. Let's not forget his DNA is found on a knife sheet. It's on the button of what's called a K-bar, which is a Marine Corps knife next to the Roman gladius. It's probably one of the most vicious stabbing instruments ever invented by man. Literally, the Marine Corps has been using it for 150 years. His car is on video visiting that area multiple times. And he's when they got him, among other things, he's throwing trash away in his neighbor's house. He's a PhD student in criminology, which means he understands familial DNA. He understands. He's probably studied the constitutional law that says once you throw it away, you're abandoning it. And we get, we catch murderers all the time by sifting through their trash. That's how we got Gilgo Beach, the pizza box. It's like that is a very common method used by law enforcement. He knew that. He's literally taking trash out, walking it over to his neighbor's house and throwing it away there. So all those people in the comments, and I can't see them, and that's fine, and I know they mean well, but they should ask themselves, when was the last time you threw away trash, like literally walked out, looked over one shoulder to the other for people who might be looking for you, and went down your neighbor's driveway to throw away trash? You
were wearing gloves too.
And you were wearing gloves
at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Yeah, and look, I have presented cell phone evidence in I don't even know how many murder cases, guys, where that is, it is so persuasive and it is so corroborative when you have a cell phone that's moving in the direction of a murder. And I mean, I can't tell you how many of these I've done. When it's pinging on those transponders, it's like footprints in a beach. And halfway thereabouts to that murder scene, in perfect time for him to have been the killer, he turns his phone off, which is what the jury will be instructed is known as consciousness of guilt. And then he turns it back on. Like he's smart enough to know that he doesn't want his phone on, but he's dumb enough. Like it's probably his first rodeo, and we all make mistakes when we ever do anything for the first time. And he goes out, and he takes his phone with him just out of pure habit. And that is absolutely damning. I've heard the defense arguments. They have to run a bunch of those like, oh, well, they can relay to other towers. I've presented that evidence 24 times at least, where I've had an expert on the stand explaining how that works. And trust me, Bryan Kohberger was driving his car that's on video towards that murder scene. If you do the math, they are going to be able to calculate the timing fits like a glove. And then he returns there afterwards. It's like, and plus there's a gag order in that case, and gag orders are relatively rare. I think it's a result of some online sleuths that blamed one of the professors at the college for having been the real killer, which is awful for that poor guy. And so there's a gag order. That gag order was affixed before the forensic analysis of the computer came back. I've never had a case, I'm sure you guys haven't either. I never had a sex case. And I never had a murder case where we didn't have something good when we did a forensic examination of the computer. And I guarantee there's going to be new evidence coming to light. So, everybody wants to outsmart the cops. Everybody wants to be smarter than the judge and the prosecutor. And, I think that's the draw of conspiracy theories, and it's like the old adage, if you were crazy, how would you know? Well, I think a better one is if you were kind of dumb, how would you know? Not everybody, trust me on this one. There's an overwhelming amount of evidence. I've presented that kind of stuff in court. It's on the friggin' knife sheet. I think he went in there, and of course I'm an attorney, right? So he's presumed innocent. I get that. But, I think my guess would be he was obsessed about one of them. He walked in and it's like Mike Tyson's quote, the famous philosopher, everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face. And Bryan Kohberger's face punch that night was he went into the room of his target and not knowing that she would commonly sleep in the same bed with her friend, totally non-sexual, but they were just two young women who would, sleep in the same bed. And he wasn't expecting that. And he made enough noise. And then the boyfriend came down and it all went belly up on him. And in the flurry of all that, he left the sheath of the knife with his DNA on it. And basically another thing is if you break it down, like doing the OJ glove thing, like, oh, I think he was framed. One of those theories is I think the police framed him, which makes no sense because that means they're framing an innocent guy when the actual killer got away. Newsflash, everybody, no cop wants to do that because that means the bad guy actually gets away and they're going to kill somebody else and it's going to be your fault. Okay. But if you take that just like one or two logical steps down the line, if they're going to frame Kohberger for that, doesn't that mean kind of like the glove and OJ that the cops had to commit the murder themselves? Like it is utterly absurd. It goes nowhere. It's not real. And in my opinion, based on what I've seen, and I haven't read any of the reports, just my commentary and the things I've reviewed, they got the right guy, I would have charged him. And it's absolutely a death case. You slaughter 4 innocent kids. I sat on a committee for 15 years that decided which cases we recommended death and which ones we didn't. Sought it in less than 4% of the cases. That is death case written all over it. And, in the state of Idaho, they might actually execute him one day. And I won't lose any
firing
sleep over that.
squad in Idaho.
Yeah.
It's one of the options. It's one of the options. I think they can elect it. Yeah. Which also gives you a little, I think that was passed by the voters, if I'm not mistaken, which gives you a little bit idea of the jury veneer in that state. I don't think they're going to have any problem with the evidence in this case or the aggravating circumstances when they weigh it for death versus LWOP.
Matt, one of the things, and look, I mean, obviously I'm playing devil's advocate. I believe everything you just said, but some of the people that don't believe what you just said, how can you explain, Matt, that he didn't get any blood in his car, that they didn't find the murder weapon, that he didn't cut himself, which is very highly likely when you stab 4 people to death?
Yeah, well, for one thing, sure. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you.
No, I just say if you stab that many people, usually you're going to cut yourself.
Yeah, I don't actually know what it's called on a K-bar. I know on a firearm, it's a flange, right? It's
the hilt.
The hilt. Yeah, the hilt. There you go. So you're talking about again, it's a stabbing implement designed 150 years ago by the Marine Corps for stabbing human beings. It's not a kitchen knife, and that's in DV or domestic violence murders. Yeah, you bet. Or OJ, very, very common that when knives are used in a homicide, it's a knife that is not designed. It's a pocket knife. It's a folding knife, and there's nothing that's going to stop the sliding. Those little square things for your viewers that are on swords and knives, that's not just to put it in a sheath and to hold it there. That's to stop bloody hands. It's for the specific purpose of stopping bloody hands from sliding onto the blade. And long before firearms, people have been stabbing each other with metal instruments for thousands of years. So that's something that we figured out about 1,500 years ago, and that's the way they designed the K-bar. So it's designed not to let your hand slide. So yeah, I have no problem with that weapon being not resulting in a cut. Doesn't look like he killed 3 young women who were all heavily intoxicated, and a young man who was completely surprised by what he saw. So you got 3 young women. Are they going to fight hard enough that they're going to turn the knife against him? No, apparently not. And then you've got the no blood in the car. They didn't figure out who he was for 2 weeks. And he's a criminology student. He had all the time in the world to clean up the inside of the car, assuming, look, he's the blood is going to be on his front. It's not going to be on the back of his pants. It's not going to be on the back of his shirt. He's killing them face forward. Assuming it's him, right? Presumed innocent, all that. But so if he sits in his seat, how much blood transfers are going to be for that? And he's got, I don't know how 3-4 weeks before they arrested him. I haven't looked at a calendar to see the dates. He's got weeks to clean up his car. So that's how. And look, you can get rid of DNA.
He actually didn't get arrested for 6 weeks.
Yeah, 6 weeks. Okay, 6 weeks with a criminology student who knows that he's got to take bleach and clean off the steering wheel. And by the way, bleach destroys DNA. It absolutely destroys DNA. That's what the crime labs use. And as a PhD student, he's going to know that. So any household cleaning product is going to get rid of the blood. But you wipe something down with bleach wipes, you're going to have no heme. That's the hemoglobin that comes with blood. You're going to have no DNA. And you can easily clean a car like that. You could clean a car like that in 6 minutes for that kind of transfer that you'd expect to see, let alone 6 weeks. So that's how.
Good. I just wanted that out there because I've presented this case and said there's an overwhelming amount of evidence, and I was attacked like I was Oswald.
No, everybody wants to be the smartest person in the room. They all want to think that everybody conspires against them. And look, in my view on that one, they got the right guy. That thing is, I don't want to call it a slam dunk because you never know what a jury's going to do, but a jury's going to convict that guy. And I think a jury's going to vote for death on him. So, but we'll see how it all goes.
The thing, I think sometimes it's almost counterproductive to go for the death penalty because then the prosecution bends over backwards and the judge bends over backwards to make sure there's nothing appealable. So every
That's right.
decision seems to go toward the defense, like even them changing the venue. I think Judge John Judge just didn't want any part of that case. He's like, let me get this case the hell out of Moscow, Idaho, send it to Boise.
Well, you're absolutely right. The judges have to be very careful, especially in the Ninth Circuit. They have the same federal judicial circuit that oversees California. And look, I mean, I've done 8 death penalty trials. Okay, and when you really sit back and think about it, we want the highest level of appellate scrutiny because sometimes mistakes are made. Sometimes, I sit on a board for Purdue University where our task is trying to find people in the state of Indiana who are wrongfully convicted. And I've enthusiastically embraced that. And I work with exonerated prisoners who work for the thing, and I do so proudly to work with those guys. So mistakes do get made. We want the highest level of appellate scrutiny, but you're right. You're absolutely right. That's why that motion got granted. The judges want to make sure that everything is done right, that every I is dotted, every T is crossed. And that what that judge did is he's eliminating appellate issues, and because the only thing worse for family members, even though there was one of the families was pretty vocal about not wanting it to change. But I'll tell you what, guys, I've had to try cases, including Rodney Alcala. That case was reversed twice before I got it. And the families go through hell when they have to go through a retrial and then a retrial after that. It destroys families. It destroys their lives. And those judges being careful is the right thing to do. I think I would have held my nose as I did it, but I think if I was that judge, I would have done the same thing. It's like, sure, in the state of Idaho, you guys want to go to another county? Have at it. They just voted for firing a squad execution. It's like, yeah, I'm comfortable with this. And remember, it has to be a death qualified jury. It's not just random people out of the community. The defendant has very, very sacrosanct, important due process rights that we all have to honor and adhere to, and it's very, very important. But the victims have rights too, and so do the people of the state of Idaho on that. And they have a right to a jury who's capable of following the law of Idaho, and the law of Idaho allows for the death penalty when the aggravating circumstances substantially outweigh the mitigating circumstances, and that's the way that works, and that includes victim impact testimony from the family. So the jury is going to be able to consider the apoplectic emotional toll that those horrific murders had on the families, on the moms, on the dads, on the brothers and sisters and friends of those 4 kids. And they're going to be instructed they have to assign an individual weight to each one of those things. And then they have to compare it to whatever Bryan Kohberger's team comes up with in mitigation. It's a bifurcated thing. So first the jury has to decide whether or not he did it, and then they have to determine the appropriate penalty. And they also in that get to include lingering doubt, which should make any of your listeners who think he's innocent should make them hopefully feel a little better. The jury gets to consider any doubt they have in the penalty phase. So look, judges don't want to convict innocent people. Cops don't want to arrest innocent people. Prosecutors don't want to prosecute innocent people. Believe me, because we've got enough work to do. And, I have every confidence that case is going to wind up exactly where it should. And maybe the jury decides that means life without possibility of parole. And, that'd be fine with me. I wouldn't lose any sleep over that. But I bet he's convicted, and I bet they come back with death.
Yeah,
and,
I believe you're right. Matt, I noticed that you started out in sex crimes cases, and I was in Manhattan North Homicide Squad. I was 16 years. I was 22 years as a sergeant, just because I couldn't pass the damn lieutenant's test. So, but I was in the detective bureau for 16 years, and I was in my homicide for the last 10. And on the same floor as us was Manhattan Special Victims. Mm-hmm. And I used to go out with them all the time because I'd be the covering boss, and I would have to go out. And I tell you something, they were great detectives, special victim detectives. They were fantastic. It was so detailed, and I would have taken almost anyone in the special victims unit in homicide because they were so thorough. They were so good. And how close is a sex crime to a murder anyway?
Well, that's a great question, right? And the answer is, so I started out in misdemeanors, then I did juvie, then I did generic felonies, and then, then they moved me to sexual assault. And I spent 4 years in sexual assault before I went to homicide. And the answer to your question is, you show up in homicide, sometimes up to half your caseload are just sex cases. They're just rapists who kill their victims, and you deal with a ton of those. So it's essentially the same case that you've been working up the previous 4 years, but this time, he made good on the threat, and or the woman died in the process, or she jumped out of the car, or bashed her head in, trying to knock her out. So it translates perfectly. There's plenty of different types of murders. Like my buddies from the gang unit that rotated in with me, they were far more versed in some of the nuances of gang prosecutions, but a lot of those were actually handled by the gang unit. So for the homicide unit, we dealt with sort of regular folks who wound up being victims, not gangsters, but 7-Eleven clerks and domestic violence murders, and the plots the conspiracies to kill people for money, and all the serial killers. They were the ones that we prosecuted. And in every serial killer case, the real ones, there's always a sexual component to that.
Absolutely. The book is called The Book of Murder, and this is Matt Murphy, former LA County Assistant District Attorney, 17 years prosecuting homicides, 26 years as a district attorney. I just got his book today, and I read almost the whole damn book today. It's so interesting. And it's not a how-to-do-it murder book the way I saw someone say in the chat. He's explaining the cases that he's worked, the legal parameters involving homicide prosecution, some of the amazing cases he's worked, high-profile cases. And, Matt, I'm just going to tell folks sort of it's not that funny, but it's funny that it's such a small world. And this is Eric Napowski, who you prosecuted. And he used to work out at my gym here in Westchester, and I knew the guy. And apparently, the murder, he killed it was a love triangle. He killed a millionaire whose girlfriend was Eric Napowski's girlfriend, and she was a flim-flam artist that was stealing all his money. She was on his she was on his will as getting a substantial amount of money upon his death. So you convicted Eric Napowski, a former pro football player and like a physical specimen. I spoke to you before we went on the air. He would warm up with 305 like it was like it was a toothpick. And he benched 500 pounds. And what I understood was when they went to lock him up, they sent like 20 federal marshals because they were a little concerned with his size, his speed, and that he was also a martial artist, a scary guy.
Yeah, he is a big boy. He's one of those that when you see him in handcuffs, it makes it look like they're mini handcuffs because the guy's just so big. He walked on to the New England Patriots. I mean, that's impossible. I think Mark Wahlberg made some movie about some guy walking onto the Eagles once, but yes. Napowski did that, and Napowski was a phenomenal, freakishly talented athlete. He, the NFL, he lasted 3 games with New England. I think he blew out his groin, and then he never, I don't think he ever really recovered from that injury. So he kind of drifted his way to California. And, that's one of those things. I don't know if that guy ever would have committed a crime in his life if he hadn't hooked up with the woman that he did. And she, we've always thought she manipulated him into murdering this man, but he did. He went in and he murdered the guy, and they got away with it for 15 years. That was a cold case that we dusted off, and I had a detective named Joe Cartwright, who is currently now the chief of police in Newport PD, and just not only, as smart as they come detective wise, but a wicked, dark sense of humor. And he's just, I hate to call a double murder case a fun case to work, but it was a single murder, but it was a conspiracy. Working with dedicated detectives is one of the pleasures of my career. And, that's one where we got to bring justice to the family that had been denied it for so long. And, we got to, when we informed the 2 daughters that really loved their dad when he was murdered, even though they had a lot of money, they're just lovely, lovely people. And there's a photo from when the verdict came back, almost 2 decades later after they'd gotten away with this thing, and we arrest them and we go through the whole process. And there's a picture of the daughter. Her name was Kim McLaughlin, one of the 2, Kimmy and Jenny, and she breaks down crying because she's so grateful to the jury and to all the hard work of the detectives on that. And that's one of the reasons why I was in homicide for 17 years. That's the kind of stuff that keeps you going and makes you want to work the next one. But yeah, Naposky, yeah, he screwed up his life. He took the life of an innocent man.
I just want to mention something, and you always mention in your book how much the interaction with the families means to you, and how much that obviously must mean to the families. And I remember watching the case before when it was live, when you were prosecuting it, and the daughters. I remember Eric Naposky's fiance was in the courtroom, and they actually comforted his fiance.
Yeah, they sure did.
And I was like, these people are amazing people. I mean, this is the fiance of the guy who murdered their father, and they're concerned with her. And I was just like, I don't have that in me. I don't have that,
No, I don't either. But you know who else tried to not comfort her, but I mean, tried to make her understand the case better so that she could let go of it and move on with her life, was Larry Montgomery, one of the lead detectives in that case, my old investigator. Like, we knew so much, and she was showing up. She was very faithful to him, appeared to be a very nice woman, very pretty too. And everybody kind of wanted to help her because she was so misguided, including Kim and Jenny, who really were like, hey, so sorry, we know this is a loss. You like literally consoled her after the verdict, which really, it speaks to, I hope it doesn't sound corny, but it speaks to their souls. They were such genuinely nice people. But her man murdered their dad based on the word of a woman who was a friggin' grifter, and left a wake of destruction for pretty much every man she ever went out with, including the guy she was married to. When we hooked her, we finally arrested her, 15 years later, and there was like $250,000 in credit cards that her poor husband didn't even know about, and he got stuck with those. So that was one of those cases. That was good guys. That was truly the good guys chasing the bad guys, and I had great detectives on that one, and they brought it home for us.
That's amazing. Matt, I don't want to keep you on all night. I could keep you here all night because this is so interesting to me. But I just want to touch upon Rex Heuermann, and I'll play another clip with you on the screen here.
And former senior FBI profiler Mary Ellen O'Toole. Thanks both for being here. Matt, you were really impressed by this.
This is how a task force is supposed to work. They took their time. It was a conglomeration of different agencies that work together seamlessly. With smart serial killers like this, they really do pay attention. And the DA or the person pointed out today on TV as he explained that we wanted to be careful to keep it secret. It's exactly how this should go. And the way they put the collage of evidence together is very impressive.
What was the breakthrough, though? Because we had years and years and years go by with nothing happening. The task force first met a little more than a year ago. What happened?
Well, I think that this hit critical mass. There were so many good pieces of evidence that sort of accumulated, but the mitochondrial DNA that came to light, I think, is the most persuasive thing. And when you look at the timeline, that all happened in just the last couple of weeks.
All right. Mary Ellen, a former FBI profiler, drew up a personality profile for the Long Island killer back in 2011. It said that the killer was bright, careful, and sadistic, and said, quote, most likely was a white male married with a girlfriend, well-educated, well-spoken, financially secure, has a job, owns an expensive car or truck. It's amazingly accurate.
It certainly seems to be. And what they do to put all of that information together is a profiler will review all the investigative files that they have available to them. They will review all the forensic reports as well, look at the neighborhood investigation. They will look at the interviews that were done with family members, develop a victimology, and from that they piece everything back together again, so that this profile is not speculative, it's not a guess. It comes from the review of all this information, and primarily the offender's behavior at the crime scene and the offender's interaction with the victim at the time of the murder. So
Matt, to what you were saying before, and she's talking about Jim Clemente. He wrote he was a former FBI agent. Him and Bobby Chacon wrote for that show Mindhunter.
Mindhunter.
They wrote for that. Yeah. I never watched those shows because I lived it for too long. I don't need to
Yeah.
watch it. Anyway, he predicted almost exactly in 2011 who and what the Gilgo Beach serial killer would be. Anyway, he predicted almost exactly. But having said that, we also have to recognize that the Gilgo Beach investigation was fucked up right from the very beginning. And the detectives didn't do a good job for years and years and years. They ignored, there were things in that case folder that could have solved the case. And it was like they didn't see it. Or I don't know who was, well, they had one detective with under that guy Burke. Was also some corruption. There's a whole other story about all of this. But look, they put a task force together, and in 3 months they ID the killer. So what does that tell you?
Yeah, well, there's, and I'm going to butcher the quote. It's like never underestimate the power of incompetence, and that's basically what that was. It was kind of amateur hour. I don't think they work a lot of those cases. And when the new DA came in, he put together a task force of some real professionals who dedicated the time and resources to putting it together. But I want to call attention just real briefly to the profile in that, because this is a fascinating thing, guys, for your viewers and your listeners. That the description of what they were predicting as far as a serial killer: highly educated, married, employed. There's this myth that we all have, and I talk about this a little bit in my book about that guy ran an architecture firm in Midtown Manhattan, pretty close to where I am right now. This was a smart, educated guy. That is like, I saw Silence of the Lambs, right? I figured serial killers were all like Buffalo Bill, right? Like some weird, creepy guy in a van, lives in a weird house on the hill. Most serial killers, and we have this image that they were abused as children, but when you work enough of these, I did 13 of them, 6 real true blue serial killers. And if there's a common thread as children, a lot of them are spoiled as kids. They tend to be educated. The Rodney Alcala case, the one we were talking about earlier, that guy was a varsity letterman in high school. He was on the yearbook committee. He had a genius level Mensa IQ. Brother went to West Point and became a war hero in Vietnam. Graduated from UCLA Film School, which is really hard to get into. And then when he was on the run, he changed his name, and he was about to graduate from NYU Film School. So that guy was a genius. That's the really disturbing part about serial killers, because the real ones are the guy that could be standing in front of you in line at a Starbucks and you would never know.
He wouldn't be standing in front of me because I wouldn't be in a Starbucks. I protest Starbucks too. Absolutely unbelievable. But something, Matt, I think that some of the things that we all can sort of praise is that now with technology, hopefully serial killers will be a thing of the past. I don't know if they'll ever be totally, but we'll catch them too quickly because
I think sorry, go ahead.
No, science, technology. Look, you can't in Manhattan, you can't pick your nose without being caught on video.
Right. So so that's what's happening in California, at least. The legislature before, I don't know, this is probably 15 years ago, before they went super crazy, they passed some one strike laws for certain sex offenses, and where if you kidnap a child, for example, you're up for a potential life sentence on that. And fortunately they haven't paroled, as many of those guys, I guess, as they could have. They understand that there's no fixing sex offenders, and when they get out, they're going to do it again, guaranteed. So you're absolutely right. We're catching them after their first or second rape now. Now they're still among us, and this goes back to ancient Rome. The serial killers are not a product of modern America. When you get into the history of it, it goes all the way back for as long as there have been people. So those guys are still going to be among us. Just hopefully they are locked up after their first rape, and they build up to it. And one of the fascinating things about Heuermann is he was keeping a journal, like a how-to, like things to remember for next time, and he deleted that. And I got to hand it to this task force again. They got into and they recovered a bunch of his deleted files, including this manifesto, like this how-to list. And for the sake of your viewer, said the Book of Murder is a how-to how-to on killing people. It's not, but he had Mindhunter by John Douglas, who's one of the original. I think he might have even coined the phrase serial killer. He wrote the book literally, and he also, I think he wrote Mindhunter. I think he wrote Silence of the Lambs and all that. So he's a very famous guy. I've met him. He's a good dude. But Heuermann had his book. He and so he talk about overwhelming evidence. And again, he's presumed innocent. But man, the cell phone evidence on that one, he was taunting his victims using their cell phones. He was taunting their families. And and what I love about this, in open areas, we got a lot of open space in Southern California still, believe it or not. And, you can have hundreds of square miles pinging off one cell phone transponder. In New York City, it's the exact opposite because it's a city. So the buildings all block it. You can narrow it down to within feet of where somebody's making phone calls. And he had his actual cell phone with him. So he's taunting the victims. And again, it's that cell phone ping. And that's, he's had his phone and he had the victim's phone. And his cruelty is going to be his downfall on that. And that's even more persuasive to me, I think, than the DNA evidence they found. So that's going to be a fascinating case. But he was working on trying to defeat modern forensics, exactly like he said, because he figured out how to get away with it. There's no fingerprints. And I don't think there's none of his nuclear DNA is found anywhere on the victims either. There's
they had a hair, I think, the mitochondrial.
Right. So that's, mitochondrial DNA. Yeah.
Yeah. If you ever need a group of really good detectives,
look at that.
We're for hire.
That's a hard-hitting punch right there. Look at that.
That was, I think, 2008. We had the investigative detail at New Year's Eve in Times Square. So,
I love that. I love that. Yeah.
I have my Jerry Garcia tie on. You see that?
That's fantastic.
Some captain saw me walk by. You see how I'm dressed there, and he goes, "Man," you guys look great. He was in uniform. I go, "Cannon's the name. Homicide's the game." The guy died laughing. He almost choked on his laughter. But it was so, Matt, this has been so fascinating. And I really like, because we're cops, both Mike and I, sometimes people think, they just think everybody's guilty. So I'm glad you were on to talk about the evidence, especially against Kohberger. People see like, the police are framing Kohberger. I'm just like, oh my God, stop it. You guys are watching too much damn TV,
Yeah, but hey guys, this is super fun for me. And I've done some pretty interesting interviews on this book tour. So I would love to come back whenever you'll have me. So
I would love to have you back on, but let me also plug your book again, since that's why it's called The Book of Murder. And it is not a how to do murders. It is talking about a murder from the point of view of a former LA assistant district attorney prosecutor, 17 years in the homicide unit, prosecuted some of the most high profile murders in his community. All around good guy. He's Irish, so he's paisan. So that's one of the reasons we and he's a surfer.
That's why we got him on here.
Little surfer.
Yeah. You can tell by the sun damage. Yeah, plenty of that.
Matt, I know I've been to California, and surfing is like a religion in California. It's unbelievable, right?
Yeah.
So you have to go to the same place every day, and if you don't belong there, people will be like, "What are you doing here? You're not allowed."
Yeah.
Here, right?
I think we've moved past that a little bit, or at least most spots. I like to think in my beach, Manhattan Beach, everybody's super, super friendly. So yeah, no, it's not like Point Break. It's like War Child and the fighting behind the bathrooms. No, I do. I try to surf every day when I'm home, every day that it's good. And it's been a part of my life forever. And it helped me balance out some of the stress of the job. I try to get in the water. You see some dolphins swim by, catch a wave. It tends to make you forget about the difficulties of the work pretty quick.
Well, Matt, besides being a great prosecutor, you're a good guy. You're a good man. And
thanks, guys. Thanks.
Good job. How you treat people, the respect that you have for all people, and that comes out in your personality. I think it's fantastic.
Well, have me back.
I absolutely will.
Yes.
And if any of your TV stations are looking for a barking dog,
hey, don't offer unless you mean it, because I know they always are. So
right there.
Yeah, right there. Mike, your final words, Mike.
I just want to say thank you very much, and I enjoyed the book very much. It was easy to read. It was colorful. I love the language that you use, the colorful language. And I really appreciate it from the preface, the very beginning, when you're talking about how the cops treated you and what they said to you, your very first homicide in the unit, to the very end. I really thought it was excellent. So thank you very much. It was
Thank you
great.
very much. Thank you very much.
Really
Coming
good.
from you guys, that actually means a lot.
Good
Thank
stuff.
And
you.
Matt, I'm going to give you some final words, and then I'll sign off.
Well, the Audible on the book is doing great. But I think if I had to sign off on one thing for your listeners that follow you guys, if there's one takeaway that I've got from my experience, there's a lot more good people in the world than bad ones. And when you get the right ones in the right spots, the good guys still win these. So never lose faith.
That's good. Are you a good Catholic boy?
Went to Loyola High School in LA, man. I was educated by the Jesuits.
Oh, so you got slapped around a lot. You got slapped around a lot when you were in school.
They taught me some discipline, that's for sure. No, they were great. They were great to me. But, yeah,
great. Folks, this is guest Matt Murphy, and the book is The Book of Murder. You can get it on Amazon. It's a fantastic read. I just got it today, and I almost finished the whole book. You can't put it down. It's an excellent book. So as I said, once we get off the air, go right on Amazon. There's going to be a run on Amazon. And Matt needs to be bi-coastal, so buy his book. It's expensive to live in New York and in LA. So anyway, folks, this is Police Off the Cuff, Real Crime Stories. Thank you so much for tuning in. Have a great night, everyone, and God bless.
Good night.
One episode just ain't enough.